All right, in this video, we are going to be talking about what is a MIDI keyboard and how to buy a MIDI keyboard for FL Studio users. So if you use a different DAW, there's still going to be a lot of value, a lot of information in these videos for you, but just understand that when someone is doing a review about a MIDI keyboard and they're not talking about your particular DAW, you got to be really careful on the information you're listening about because, for example, you can even see right here, it says like complete music production kit, 3 DAWs with auto mapping. It's like, well, you have to understand that a MIDI keyboard may not work the exact same in your DAW as another DAW, and sometimes they're not even compatible with your DAW. Like, yes, you'll be able to play like your keys, but the biggest thing is really these transport buttons. So this is the current MIDI keyboard I am using. It's the M Audio Oxygen Pro, and again, I'm always about a 49 MIDI keyboard. So these ones all here are very good. This one's old, so you can't buy it anymore. These two are still available. Okay, so let me just set them up. I got some tables here and I'll get a better camera look for you. But again, I just want to stress, I look for a 49 key MIDI keyboard because I like my audio interface right to the right. So let me just break down that workflow. So my MIDI keyboard goes here, and then this is a little custom keyboard tray I've built, really, really powerful. So I'm able to play my keys really good. I'm able to access my transport buttons really good for play, stop, all that stuff. I'm able to turn up and down my volume really easy. I'm able to access my typing keyboard super easy, same with my mouse. Okay, see that workflow? If you have a 61 key, what's going to happen is, well, first of all, this desk that I have is actually very, very big. So most desks are not this big, so a 61 key is way bigger than a 49 key. And a 49 key is still pretty big. So 49 key fits on the desk, and it's center, so I can still play. Got my transport buttons, got my audio interface, and good to go. All right, so what I want to first do is let's just quickly look over my first MIDI keyboard. This thing was awesome. Had a really, really good experience. This was by M Audio. Again, we're not talking about brands here, what's the best, all that stuff. I'm just going to tell you my experience with this particular product at the time from that company, because remember, companies always change. So you can't say, oh, this is the best company because in 3 years they get bought out or something happens. So this one was the M Audio Axiom 49 second generation. There was a first generation. I think you had some buttons and stuff, like a number pad you can enter. This one's the second generation. I had a really, really good experience with it. The only thing that started to fail were the octave buttons. When I'd hit up and down, like it wasn't working very good. I actually took apart the MIDI keyboard, I fixed it for a bit, started to fail again, and I was like, okay, time for an upgrade. So that's where I got, this is also by M Audio. This is the Oxygen Pro. And if you've been following me for a bit, you know I have a free MIDI script for it, as well as a premium template, but we'll talk more about that after. And then I got this one just for a review because the price point of it is very good. This one is the Native Instruments Complete Control A49. Very, very good build, but in terms of its software, I didn't like. It kind of forces you to use a lot of software, and you don't have velocity curves built in. So again, the goal of this video is not to put down brands or say this brand's better than this brand. I just want to talk to you about experience as well as, again, from an FL Studio point of view. All right, so let me just quickly break down each MIDI keyboard separately just to show the features it has, because there is no really best MIDI keyboard. For me, if I were to get like my dream MIDI keyboard, it would really be semi-weighted keys, which are pretty good. These endless encoders, so an endless encoder means that it can always move left and right. And so what that means is this has an absolute, so it has a beginning and an end. But the problem with this is if you switch banks, now the knob is a different knob, but because it's physical and it's absolute, it's hard to explain if you're new. But in other words, what happens is if we move it like this, so right now it's like it's knob 1. If we go to the next bank, this becomes knob 9. Well, knob 9, let's say in our software, is like right here. And this has a feature in there called soft takeover, so it doesn't just jump automatically. But when it is absolute, it doesn't give you that freedom of an endless encoder, which means that if you switch banks, you can just pick up exactly where it is, which is super, super powerful for workflow. Okay, so my dream MIDI keyboard would be semi-weighted keys, endless encoders, and honestly, having motorized faders here would be phenomenal. Behringer did make one time, and you know, I would be willing to pay that $500-700 kind of thing for just a premium little setup with motorized faders, endless encoders. You got to have the transport buttons with all of these: loop, back, forward, stop, start, record. Drum pads, not really necessary, but if you have my Oxygen Pro template, that is giving a really cool workflow with the MIDI scripting. Okay, you can see here on the Complete Control A49, it is a little more basic. The build quality is good, but you just get your knobs. But they are the endless encoder, and they are built very, very nice. Like very, very nice knobs. Another cool thing with these is they are touch sensitive. So if you touch them, like it would kind of notify you within your DAW about what parameter you're on. Same here. So let me say that one more time, because if any brands are listening, I really think this would be a product that would sell. A 49 key semi-weighted, motorized faders, endless encoders, and the transport buttons that have all of these. The loop, because in FL Studio, this changes between song mode and pattern mode. It's fast for workflow. We go back a bar, we go forward a bar. So how this works is you hit stop once, it will stop the song. You hit stop again, it goes back to the beginning of the playlist. This is play and pause, and then you have record, right? Drum pads, they are nice to have. Like I said, if you want to check out my Oxygen Pro drum pad layout, really cool to open up different windows based off of MIDI scripting. But okay, so let's cover this quickly, okay? So all MIDI keyboards typically have a pitch and mod wheel. So pitch and mod wheel. And same here, but again, they don't label them, which I would like to see that. You have your octave buttons. So again, trust me, a 49 key gives you tons of keys to play. I usually find people that are a bit newer who many times don't even know how to play the piano. They think they want that 61 key because it's going to make them, they think they're going to be more creative and stuff. But I'm telling you guys, I can play the piano pretty well. Like, I'm not a super expert, but I really enjoy a 49 key when I'm making beats, because you have to understand when we're making beats, maybe your first melody is with two hands, but then every single melody almost after that is usually just with like your right hand. It's just like a melody, right? So you just have to understand the workflow. 49 key is awesome. It's more affordable, smaller, fits on the desk better, and you can get your audio interface to the side. Okay, so you got your octave buttons, and octave buttons. Another thing to say is these ones are squishy buttons, which are nice because they're quiet, but I usually find that the squishy buttons kind of start failing after a while a little bit. The clicky buttons are very strong, I find, but they are loud, so that's kind of annoying, if I'm doing my training courses and stuff. But I usually find the clicky buttons are better built. And then we have our faders, or our sliders, right? Faders, sliders. This one does not come with faders and sliders, only knobs, so we'll get to that shortly. Now, one thing just to say with the sliders is in FL Studio, you can get a really, really cool workflow. Again, you just switch your banks. So you can see down here, it says bank. So typically a lot of these MIDI keyboards, they give you a couple banks. So in other words, if you have 8 knobs and you go to the next bank, then you have another set of 8 knobs. Then you go to another set of 8 knobs. But again, when you have the absolute knobs, you don't really have that workflow. Okay, so sliders, pretty straightforward. Here, you got a bunch of extra buttons. You can set these up to probably whatever you want, especially now with MIDI scripting. Nice big LCD display. I did enjoy this. This display is a little bit small, and this one, well, you do have one, is very, very small, but you can see. Sometimes it's nice just to see like what note you're hitting, or if you control a parameter, it'll pop up, and it's just a nice big LCD. So I really, really enjoyed this Axiom at the time. And again, the only thing that was failing was really just the octave buttons. I probably would have still had it to today. When it comes to all this stuff, a lot of times this is like unique to its own MIDI keyboard. But for the most time, like if you want to change channels or stuff like that, for the most part, for us as beat makers, we are usually just using virtual instruments, because if you are plugging in like a sound module through MIDI into here, that's where like changing patches and channels and all that stuff is, that's what it's meant for. But for us, we just plug in a USB cable into our computer, and we just select presets off of our virtual instrument, usually with a mouse. But again, if you have the Oxygen Pro, I have set that up off of the drum pads where you can start changing your presets, which is really powerful for that fast hands-on workflow. Okay, so the endless encoders, again, I would really like to see that on the Oxygen Pro. So if this comes within a refreshed model, this MIDI keyboard as is, everything is awesome about it. Except the only thing is, if this was endless encoders, this would be like the perfect MIDI keyboard, except it doesn't have the motorized faders, but you still get a pretty good experience. Again, the transport buttons, you notice how it has loop, back, forward, stop, play, and record. Same thing here. We have loop, back, forward, stop, play, record. All right, again, they are clicky, so they are loud, but again, if you don't hit them hard, I'm sure these will last like forever. And then again, you have your drum pads. So drum pads, you have to understand that sometimes people buy a MIDI keyboard thinking that they're gonna hit the drum pads because they see that in videos and tutorials and stuff, right? But you have to understand a drum pad is the same thing as a piano key. Okay, it just feels different. But for example, you can set this up to play like C5, and then you can play C5 right there, right? So it's the same thing, it's just a different feeling, but you're just playing the same note. You have velocity, so if you hit it gentle, you got your velocity, right? So it's just workflow and mindset, as well as understanding what you are purchasing. Okay, so that is a quick overview of this MIDI keyboard. So same thing here. Again, look, we have our pitch and mod wheel, we have our octave buttons, we have our sliders. The sliders are nice. Okay, I really have enjoyed my experience with this MIDI keyboard. Now, a lot of these newer MIDI keyboards are having functions like auto chord mode and stuff like that, scale mode. For me, I don't like that. I think that is making the producers of this generation much weaker than what they could be, because being a music producer takes a lot of skill. You have to learn the keys, and once you learn the keys, you really become a better producer. So I really don't like features like this, and what happens is the product, M Audio has to do research. They have to write code, all that stuff, and so they price that into the product. But I'm just speaking for me as a beat maker. I like to make custom beats. I like to play my melodies. I like to program my drum loops with one-shot drum samples. And then in terms of the ARP, FL Studio has a built-in arpeggio, and it's really, really good. And they have different styles of, they have a couple different arpeggio modes. Like, I'm not just talking in the channel sampler, I'm also talking like in the piano roll. You can adjust like your arpeggio and really customize it. So in terms of arpeggio, again, doing everything in FL Studio is pretty powerful. Okay, moving forward here. So again, these buttons are just, again, every MIDI keyboard is unique in its features. So this is just, if you're going to be using a certain DAW. But again, just because a MIDI keyboard says it's compatible with your DAW might not give you the workflow that you're looking for. So when I purchased this Oxygen Pro, I had a horrible experience when I first started with it. Had to do a lot of testing, figured out the problems. Again, wrote that free MIDI script, have the premium template. Again, you don't need the premium template, but the free MIDI script, what it does is it gets the transport button setting good. And then there was something called like the tempo sync, which was set to internal. You had to set it to external. And then from then on, everything was good. But it was just figuring out like what is the problem with this MIDI keyboard. Figured it out. Very, very good experience now. But again, the help manual isn't going to teach you that stuff, because what happens is who's ever writing the code for this, they have a lot on their plate. They have to make sure that this thing works good for all these different music programs, and that's a lot of work. So again, this is why this is specifically for FL Studio users. So again, we have a lot of drum pads in here. When you hit the bank, you go to another set of drum pads. Okay, so same thing, you have 4 banks. And so again, off of my Oxygen Pro template, it just gives you a cool workflow if you want to open up open up a VST or close your VSTs or switch presets, all that kind of stuff. I will leave the link in the description about the Oxygen Pro version 2.1 at the moment. So again, drum pads, they're okay, a little cheap building on this, but again, I don't use the drum pads for drum pads. I use my keys, because again, if I was even sampling, I'm going to use my keys for my slices. It's just way easier, and you get way more slices. And you can even hit your octave, and you get more slices again. Let's quickly look at the A49 here, because the build quality is very good. It's priced very, very nice, okay? But I just want to quickly talk about my experience with it, because I did have an in-depth review on it, but this is just a quick overview. And then again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what I look for in a MIDI keyboard, okay? But it's nice just to kind of see different MIDI keyboards from an actual FL Studio producer, someone who makes beats with FL Studio, and my experience over many years of making beats. So nice feeling mod and pitch wheel. Again, like it would be very nice to see a label, but the pitch wheel has the spring back, the mod wheel does not, okay? You have your octave up, octave down, and when you power it, when you actually put the USB in, all this lights up, so you can see things a lot easier. And so you can just see all the different options here. Again, even they have like the scale mode, art mode. I don't like that stuff. They're trying to cater towards the new producer, but honestly, just focus on the seasoned producers, because what will happen is people want to be like the seasoned producer. You want to get better at producing. You want to learn the keys. You want to learn to make professional beats. And if we look at the transport buttons here, so this has play, stop, record, and loop. So loop is awesome. I really like that loop button, but it doesn't have the forward and back. So you can see this has forward and back, and I really like this just to go back a bar or forward a bar. Same thing here, we have forward and back, so forward and back, but the A49 does not have the forward and back. All right. The knobs themselves are very, very well built. So the build quality of this thing is excellent. Again, I just want to quickly mention again, in order to take full advantage of this MIDI keyboard, you do have to install their software. And I always just find that Native Instruments always makes you install so much software to use their products. So I always like when you are just able to use the MIDI keyboard, you just install a simple driver and then you're good to go. Same with plugins. So for example, a lot of plugins when we're making beats, back in the day, everything was just an executable file. You get the DLL file or the .vst3 file, and you're good to go. You can use that plugin. Then if you have to install a quick license code, cool. You know, that's totally fair. But now companies are starting to make you install like a portal software. And it really, the portal software is just a big advertisement on your computer. This is what I recommend to my students who want to learn to make beats. And, you know, they join the platform, they watch all the courses. But then the thing is, well, what equipment do you need to make beats, right? Like, you know, what speakers do you need? What audio interface do you need? What MIDI keyboard? So for me personally, I think the MIDI keyboard as a beat maker is actually the most important tool. Yes, your speakers are important, all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, you can always listen to your music on different speakers to, you know, for translation, to fix your mix. If your MIDI keyboard does not work well in your music program, you're not going to have a fun and enjoyable experience. So in short, a MIDI keyboard plugs into your computer through USB. A MIDI keyboard by itself has no sounds, so don't think that a $1,000 MIDI keyboard is better than a $100 MIDI keyboard. Okay, a lot of people who are new get tricked by that. So a MIDI keyboard has no sounds in it, so we are using virtual instruments inside of our computer to control our sounds. Okay, so the biggest thing is making sure you have high quality piano keys. You want to make sure you have those transport buttons. And then if you have the sliders and the knobs, it does give a little bit of a better workflow, okay?